editorial page editor, and copy editor, Doug Harper. So, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks. Good to be here.
I wanted to start off with some of your foreign relations bills that you have forward, especially with the issue of Syria. I know that's an issue that you're following closely. President Obama said yesterday that Assad had crossed a red line with using chemical weapons. What do you think the next step should be?
Well, what I would hope the administration would do, and it's apparent now on the record that the administration will send more support than it had to date, and even arming the opposition, which I think is the right thing to do in light of the circumstances, which I'll try to walk through quickly. But one of the best things I think the president could do is to take the bipartisan bill that passed the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. It was a joint effort of a lot of people in the committee, but principally Chairman Menendez and the Republican leader, or ranking member Bob Corker, Senator Marco Rubio, and I, the four of us, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, designed a piece of legislation which I think is a good, if I can use the word menu or list of things we can do, not only to give the president the authority to arm the opposition, so that's clear, but we very specifically say that there's not any authorization for the use of force, so no boots on the ground, none of that, but gives the president clear authority to arm the opposition. It also has a sanctions provision. If you do business with the Assad regime, you should be sanctioned. It has a provision for a reconstruction fund so that the day after, which is critically important, when we all hope that Assad is gone, that they have the ability to stand up a new government. So provisions like that, and it's a good, I think it's a good strategy in one place that the president could use, or something substantially similar. So that's part one. Part two, though, is what do we do about the military aspects of this? I believe because of what's happening right now, what has happened over the last couple of weeks and months, even days, is we have to make a decision, and it seems like the administration has made a decision, or at least is close to making a complete decision, whether or not we want to affect what happens on the ground. Do we want to affect what happens on the battlefield or not? And if we don't, then we should go in another direction. The problem is if we don't try to do something right now, meaning in the near term, the regime in Iran is greatly strengthened if Assad stays in power. They are emboldened right now. They are putting a lot of resources into this against our interests, number one. And the Iranian regime is plotting against Americans every single day. So this is our national security interest. In addition to Iran itself, the regime, Hezbollah, is a terrorist organization that has killed Americans and is plotting every day to kill more Americans. The last thing we should do is to fail to take action that will in any way empower or embolden Hezbollah. And they are riding high right now. They are the main reason, in addition to the air power that the Syrian regime has, the main reason that in the Battle of Qusair, that went so badly for the opposition. Here's the problem. Right around the corner, there's going to be a big battle in Aleppo. If Aleppo falls, or if the opposition is defeated there, I don't like to say this, but I'm afraid it's true, that it's entirely possible that the opposition cannot win this. Assad stays in power. Iran is strengthened tremendously. It'll affect our ability, or anyone's ability, to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, because they will be ever strengthened. And the other part of this is obviously Hezbollah, and it's a bad day for us if Assad stays in power. So if we want to affect the outcome, we've got to take steps to do that. And I've even suggested that in a coalition effort, we could take other military steps. A safe zone in the northern part of the country, where we have Patriot missile batteries. We have this wonderful technology there that could help us provide a safe zone, different than a no-fly zone. It's a wholly different strategy, which I have not endorsed. But I think a safe zone in the northern part of the country to give the opposition some sanctuary, some umbrella of protection would help enormously. We would all be better off, and I'll end with this, I know it's a long answer, but we'd all would be better off if there was some way, led by the United States in a coalition effort, to take out airplanes on the ground, the Syrian regime's airplanes. Because the big differential in the battlefield, and maybe the difference between winning and losing, is the air power that the regime has. You can't expect the opposition to take out airplanes with machine guns or even RPGs. They need greater weapons. In fact, I think it would be, as I said, we'd be better off if their air force, the regime's air force, was badly degraded. So this is a really important set of questions that we've got to answer, and we've got to get the right answer, because if we have the wrong result in Syria, it has implications for the region. It harms our national security tremendously, and I think puts our own people at risk.
How can we make sure that we can trust the rebels? If we put guns
Good
in their
question.
hands, if they get in power, how can we trust that they're going to follow through with spreading democracy?
Well, I made it very clear in a phone call. That's a very good question. I should have addressed it. Made it very clear in a phone call to General Idris. He's head of the Syrian military. In a phone call the other day, he's right there, I mean, literally in the battle zone. I made it very clear to him. I said, look, I'm all in favor of helping you. I'm paraphrasing a longer conversation, but you have to assure us that these extremist groups, the most significant example of which is not only Al-Qaeda, but the Al-Nusra front. You can't have our weapons and our help go to empower extremist groups who might be on the side of the opposition, but are not on our side. That vetting process has been going on for months. If anything, it has to be amplified or intensified so that we can be sure that any help that we provide will be done only after that vetting is done. We speak to that in the legislation, and there are parts of the bill that speak directly to that, the important precondition of adequate vetting.
In previous episodes like this, where we've started to supply weaponry, we've also supplied advisors to assist in the proper use of the weaponry. Is that going to happen this time? And if so, does that start the creep towards advisors first and then troops to protect the advisors?
No, I don't contemplate that. I think and I don't think we should go in that direction. I don't think we need to have American boots on the ground at all. Now, in some circumstances, we know from our history, and I don't know this to be true in this case, but there are circumstances where you might have intelligence officials on the ground, and that's classified, and we don't know that they're there. But in terms of American military personnel, there is no reason for them to be on the ground. All these, when you look at history, even recent history, the analogies are never perfect, right? People say, well, this is another Libya. Well, no, it's not. It's a lot more complicated than Libya. It's not Iraq. It's not Afghanistan. I think the closest analogy would be Bosnia. When we had American air power that changed the equation on the battlefield. But I'm even concerned about sending American planes, because planes usually have pilots in them, and they're Americans.
Right.
I would not. If someone said to me, which I tend to believe, that you've got to change, the only way to win this is to change the air superiority, or to degrade their air power, I'd rather see a coalition effort where you can do surface-to-surface missiles to hit the planes. You don't need American pilots, you don't need American boots on the ground, but we can use our technology to affect the outcome. Just like we've affected the battlefield worldwide against terrorism by the use of drones,
Right.
which doesn't involve boots on the ground, but thank goodness we have technology that allows us to change the equation. So I think, and look, at the time, during the Clinton administration, there were a lot of people who said don't go near that, and fortunately we made the right decision. We're able to affect the outcome in that conflict.
Do you think it was President Clinton who pushed the administration into taking this step?
No, I know there was a lot of coverage of his comments.
Yeah.
But no, I think the administration was moving in this direction. But I think the administration waited, in my judgment, waited too long. They're too cautious for I mean, I was calling for a coalition effort to use missiles to degrade the air superiority back in December.
Right.
If anything, it's gotten so much worse. And when you combine, think about what's on the table now that wasn't even on the table 6 months ago. Confirmed use of chemical weapons. That is the red line you spoke of. That is reason enough to take action. But I think there are other red lines, or whatever color you want to use. But when we saw the exponential increase in refugees, to the point now where by the end of this calendar year, you're going to have 1 million refugees in Turkey, 1 million refugees in Lebanon, and another 1 million refugees at least in Jordan. That's unsustainable for that region. Whether we like to admit it or not, the Middle East cannot have those numbers of refugees and not to affect the security dynamic in those 3 countries in the region. I mean, just think about Jordan alone. The refugee number in Jordan by the end of the year would be the equivalent of the United States having more than 100 million refugees. Some people think if you do the math, it's even higher, 150 million maybe,
Yeah.
but a huge number. Imagine what that would do to our economy. You can imagine what it's doing to these countries. So the chemical weapons is a substantial factor. The refugee problem creates all kinds of instability in the region. And I think among the most compelling reasons is Iran and Hezbollah in there with both feet wanting to win, which for the region just puts on steroids a Sunni Shia fight in the region, which puts Israel at risk, and I think puts our national security at risk. And anyone who doubts that they're plotting against us every day just needs to read the account in the paper a couple months ago where the Iranian regime was ready to blow up a restaurant in Washington, D.C. to kill a foreign diplomat. Mm-hmm. So they are deadly serious about attacking us. It's not simply we've got to worry about Al-Qaeda, we've got to worry about the Iranian regime, Hezbollah, and several others. So I don't think we can escape this challenge.
Iran's going through an election then?
Today, actually, yeah.
How,
Hard to predict what will happen, but it seems like no matter who is elected, that individual will be as radically or radically opposed to us as the next one, and not just radically opposed to us, but radically committed to a nuclear weapon, to developing a nuclear weapon.
could be worse.
What's that?
Could be worse.
Probably couldn't be worse, yeah. And look, I think we have taken, our government has taken a lot of important steps to prevent that from happening. I mean, the array of sanctions that we have imposed unilaterally, that the European Union or other countries have imposed on Iran, is unprecedented. No country probably in recent history, but certainly in the history of Iran, you've never had those kinds of sanctions in place that really have had a measurable impact on their economy. I mean, every number they hope would be up is down. Oil production's way down. Inflation is up instead of down. It's causing real economic pain to the regime. But they are very brutal, and they are committed, I think, to trying to obtain a nuclear weapon. And they're very brutal and repressive on their own people. One of the parts of our strategy can't simply be take every step possible to prevent them from having a nuclear weapon. We've got to continue to pressure the regime as it relates to human rights and their own people, and that's something I think that gets lost in the debate, the discussion.
Is there any other work that you're doing on, foreign relations that you'd like to discuss?
Well, there's a lot obviously happening all at the same time, but one of the responsibilities that you have on the Foreign Relations Committee, but frankly any member of Congress shares some responsibility for making sure that the drawdown that is taking place in Afghanistan goes well and achieves our strategic objectives, but doesn't do it in such a way that it puts our troops at risk as the drawdown is happening. So that, trying to monitor that and trying to do everything we can to be constructive there is important. I mean, the security numbers there right now are about 175 and 150, meaning they have about 175,000 Afghan army troops that are in place now, and I think I'm right with 150, but right around 150,000 police. That combined force, they want to get it to a number just a little bit north of 300,000 combined, and they're getting there. And there's some indication that they can take the fight on their own to the enemy. So that's something that's very important as they draw down. One area that I've paid a lot of attention to is Afghan women and girls, so that as this drawdown occurs and as the Taliban or any extremist group, especially the Taliban, thinks that somehow they can do business the way they used to do business, we got to make sure that we take steps to ensure that the gains made for women and the gains made for girls in school especially are maintained. I mean, just a decade ago, some of these things are measurable, but just a decade ago, there were, I guess I'm trying to remember the exact number, but several 100,000 Afghan boys in school, but no girls. Now you have several million children in school in Afghanistan, and about a third of those are girls. And that's one of the ways that you measure their society and how they're doing, but it's also one of the ways you reduce terrorism. Because if you have more girls in school that are educated and can read and can, when they become mothers and wives, you want to make sure that they can educate their children in a broad-based way and not in a narrow way that leads to a life of terrorism. And unfortunately, you can sometimes draw a direct connection between literacy rates and economic success of women in a place like Afghanistan and the terrorism or the kind of an incubator for terrorists. Because if you're poor and you can't read, you're more likely to be influenced by an extremist or an extremist element. So we want to do everything we can to help. And this administration has done a lot. Secretary Clinton's done a lot, and I know Secretary Kerry's committed to those issues. One last thing, and I know it's a long answer. I'll be quick on this. When you look at Afghanistan and Pakistan, one of the areas I've worked on, probably I don't think there's any other senator that's done more on this issue, is the issue of reducing the flow of calcium ammonium nitrate from Pakistan into Afghanistan that makes the IEDs, so-called roadside bombs, that have killed. It's the single greatest killer of our troops in Afghanistan. We've made a lot of progress. We're finally, after several years of pushing, getting the Pakistani government and the Pakistani fertilizer producers, but it's pretty much a small group, to recognize that this is a threat to our troops and it's a threat to their own people. So we're making progress, but we still have a long way to go on that, and we've got to continue to push. And the Defense Department's worked on this, the State Department's worked on it, lots of people, members of Congress have, but we still have more work to do to reduce that flow and to protect our troops.
I know that job growth has been something that you've really talked a lot about. I know you were in town today talking to some small business leaders. You have kind of come forth with a bill that would give tax breaks to small businesses that expanded their workforce or their business. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're actually down at the Federal Tap House, or what will be the Federal Tap House when it opens, I think, I guess in about a week or two. We were there to talk about a larger bill that I've introduced with Senator Collins from Maine, which, as you know, on job creation strategies, we don't have enough Democrats and Republicans working together. And I don't want to dwell on that too much, but that's a reality. But the two of us have introduced a bill which is really it's not brand new ideas necessarily in every case, but it's a combination of tax strategies that both parties have agreed upon. One of them that I was talking about mostly at the restaurant, or what will be the restaurant, is a provision on depreciation, and it's specifically geared towards small businesses and restaurants and retail stores, where if you want to expand your business, if you want to add a wing or do some new construction, the traditional rule was you get to depreciate that over 39 years, a long time. So you get a little bit of a depreciation every year, and that's good, and it's nice to have a little piece of the pie every year. But what happened a few years ago was that depreciation schedule was shrunken from 39 years down to 15 years. So you get more bang, more depreciation per year, and therefore more economic benefit. If we don't take action this year, that will go back to the old rule, which a lot of businesses don't want us to go back to. So John Cornyn from Texas and I, Democrat and Republican, introduced a bill to maintain that 15-year depreciation. Got great support on both sides of the aisle. That one provision on depreciation is one of the core elements of the bill that Susan Collins and I have introduced. And I know we have a summary of the bill here. We'll make sure that folks have that. But so the other, this expensing provision, so-called Section 179, it's good news, bad news. The good news is that the old dollar amount was only about $25,000. That was during the last several years. That expensing provision went up to $500,000. The businesses love that, but that's going to go out of existence back to $25,000 if we don't act. One of the core elements of this bill will say, look, let's forget this year to year to year uncertainty that comes with that. Let's keep that Section 179 expensing, meaning you're able to deduct it like a current expense. Let's keep that at $250,000. Don't allow it. We can't keep it at $500,000 forever, but we don't want it to go as low as $25,000. Let's keep it at $250,000, make it permanent. End of story. Businesses really like that. That's why you get people in both parties supporting.
Well, something that small businesses around here have been concerned about is the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
And how they're going to implement that. They have told me that they don't have enough information at this point to even know what's going on. And some are thinking about, cutting their staffs down and going with part-time work so that they can get around some of those provisions in the act. Has this been implemented as smoothly as you hoped it would? Because you did vote for the act.
I did. And I've heard a lot of the same concerns. Number one, what's been implemented so far, for the most part, I think has been very positive. When you consider that finally we're at a point now where we can say that never again will we allow a child with a pre-existing condition to not get coverage or treatment. That was in the law, went into effect in the fall of 2010. That's a good result. It's implemented, and we should never go back. The next couple of years we'll see the implementation of a similar provision on pre-existing conditions for adults. But under the old way, you could be a father and a mother with health insurance for your family and for your children, paying your premiums, doing everything playing by the rules, and your child would be discriminated against because they had pre-existing conditions. That's gone well. The children alone, by that pre-existing condition provision, the number now covers about 17 million children. If you reverse those two digits to 71, you get another bit of good news, which is the number of Americans now who have free preventative care. 71 million, the total is, about half of those are older citizens. So that's a good result on free preventative care that was never there before. Filling the donut hole, the prescription drug coverage gap, where an older citizen pays to a certain amount and falls into this gap where they have to pay extra dollars for prescription drugs. The bill began to fill that hole. So you have now a little more than 6 million older citizens in the country have been positively benefited by filling that donut hole to a tune of more than $6 billion. That's a good result. I'll stop there because there might be a few others. But I'm hearing exactly what you're hearing. Business is very concerned. Some anxious or uncertain, or both. So what's critically important is HHS and the administration have to do a better job short term, but especially between now and the end of the year, in walking through the benefits, walking through how businesses will comply, and providing the kind of technical help for businesses. I don't think we're anywhere near a point at which we could say we're satisfied. We've got a long way to go. The next 6 months to the next year, I think, will be very difficult. I think it'll be rocky, it'll be a difficult time. We have to make sure we get this right. And if that means, if you're a Democrat and you say you're for health care and you voted for the bill, you darn well better make it work well. You can't just say, we've done it, it's over, we passed it, let's just move on. We have an obligation to make sure that it works, number one. If you're a Republican and you care about health care, you say it's important, you say it's important to businesses, and you say you care about kids, your answer can't be repeal and walk away. You've got to figure out a way to be constructive and to make sure this works as well as possible. Because if it's in effect, which I think it will be for at least a number of years, if not for a long time, you've got to be part of the effort to make it work. So fortunately, sometimes you're seeing Democrats and Republicans who would maybe disagree on the vote for the Affordable Care Act, but have come together to make changes, to make fixes or alterations. The medical device fee was one of those examples.
You worked with Senator Toomey to...
Yeah, among others. When I voted for the bill, the medical device fee was one of the pay-fors, because everyone said, you got to pay for the bill, right? Bill gets passed, CBO says this bill will not only be paid for, it'll reduce the deficit by $140 billion over 10 years. In the second decade, CBO said it would be much higher in terms of deficit reduction. One of the pay-fors in the bill was about, memory serves me, 19 to 20 billion, if I remember. Don't hold me to that, but it's around that neighborhood. Was the total amount you get from this medical device fee. Sounds like a good idea because it's a fee and you can help pay for it and you get a lot of other benefits. A lot of medical device manufacturers in the state were coming to me, were coming to Senator Toomey and others, and saying, this is going to hurt us, it'll hurt us on innovation, it'll hurt us from being competitive. Initially I was skeptical and said, well, I don't agree with you. Month after month after month of engagement. My staff engaged for months, I engaged, staff did a lot of good work. I finally said, you know what, they make a compelling case. We should repeal that. So you had this, coming together of Democrats and Republicans saying we should repeal that provision. Now, that's an example of people working together to change the bill without repealing the whole thing to make it work for in that instance. Every time we do that, we have to make sure that we can move forward. And I think there are ways to do that, but this is going to be very hard. Now, HHS would tell you that they are on the cusp within a short period of time, starting this summer, of really having a sustained and aggressive and far-reaching education effort to work with businesses and others.
I know that some people were actually upset because they were taking money out of the fund to pay for that education. Representative Pitts had kind of said that the money that's there should be used to help people get health care, not to go around using it as a promotional type.
Well, I think we got to make sure that businesses know exactly what they're going to be facing, and if we have to use some dollars to that, I think I'd rather see HHS being overly focused on telling people what's going to happen. But even with that education, we have to see. Maybe at the end of that process, it'll calm the waters and things will be better. But this could be very difficult. This could be at least, if not more so, in terms of difficulty, in terms of people understanding what it is, as we went through with the prescription drug legislation under President Bush. Remember, that was passed, and it sounded good because it was help on prescription drugs. So and you had a period where people were very confused and people wanted to do away with it. Now that is settled in and people are much happier with it. I hope we can reach that point in the near term as opposed to the long term. But this is going to be difficult, and we have to try to get it right.
But didn't you want to overhaul the Medicare Part D?
What's that?
Didn't you want to overhaul that, Medicare Part D?
When you say overhaul?
I thought I read something that you wanted to overhaul that program.
Oh, I think you're going back, gosh, I don't remember what year it is now. Back then, back in the several years after that, there were a lot of people raising a lot of questions about it. That has fortunately died down and people are more satisfied with it now.
What level of concern do you have about the issues of privacy and security raised by the NSA revelations?
Well, if we get this right, and this goes back to the founding of our country. I mean, we've always had this tension between liberty and security. Ben Franklin was pretty blunt about it. I mean, he was critical of those who waited too much to the security front. Mm-hmm. But that tension's always been there, ever more so in this modern era where we have this remarkable technology that gives us the ability to track bad guys and get to them before they kill us or kill our people. So I start from the national security question. How do we continue to take the steps we've taken, especially since 9/11, to keep our country safe? Pretty remarkable record when you think about it. 2 administrations over now 11 years. I'm actually surprised when you look back that we didn't have more incidents. Mm-hmm. That didn't happen by accident. It didn't happen because the terrorists were kind of sleeping. It happened because we had very effective policies to prevent and disrupt those kinds of plots. Mostly by Al-Qaeda, but I'm sure others as well. So that's, you've got a good track record now. And I think we've got to make sure we think very carefully about changing the dynamics or the architecture, so to speak, that allows us to track down bad guys and capture or kill them.
Have you had briefings on these programs?
We just had one yesterday. But let me just add the second part of this. The other part is that we can't lose sight of is the liberty interest, people's privacy, and making sure that within the limits of the law that our national security personnel or agencies don't cross that line. But I think we can get that balance right. I think, frankly, we're doing a good job of getting it right now. And one of the reasons I can say that with more confidence today than 24 hours ago is because we had a briefing yesterday. It was classified, so I can't talk about what we learned, but I can talk about my impression. And usually when you go into these briefings, it's senators and very, very few only staff that have a certain clearance level. And you're briefed on Afghanistan or Pakistan or Iran or some foreign policy or security issue. And usually it lasts about 20 minutes, and then they take questions. In this case, the briefing part of it lasted a lot longer, so we're able to hear a lot more. Hear specific examples of how these laws that we're debating and the policies or procedures that flow from those laws are helping to protect us. It was very helpful. And we also heard a lot about, and look, some of this is when it's not simply what you read, it's the demeanor and the presentation by the national security officials, by folks in the FBI or NSA, and their awareness of and efforts to comply with our laws was, in my judgment, pretty impressive. They are keenly aware that they have limits under the law, but they are also giving us chapter and verse about how those laws have helped us, helped to protect us. So I think there's nothing wrong with debate on this. We can have a debate about the word relevant in the Section 215 of the Patriot Act. Is the administration over-interpreting relevant? Is it too broad? Did the Bush administration do that, or did the Obama administration? That's fine. We can debate a lot of these things, but the way to do it is not to disclose classified information. We're a government of laws, not of men. You can't just decide, I don't like things here. I don't think things are going well here. I'm just going to disclose classified information, which puts everyone at risk. So
I think before these revelations came out, the understanding was that NSA had wide latitude through the FISA court to intercept transmissions that deal with foreign nationals. And now it seems as though, well, it's everyone's in this country. It's their telephonic records, which are open to surveillance. What's the connection? Has that been explained to you? not everyone in the United States is calling a foreign national or talking. So where comes the linkage that allows that level of surveillance of U.S. citizenry?
Yeah, I think it's really a question of, and this could be, this could be the subject of a lot of debate and interpretation, but what's done, how is that information retrieved, and then what's done with it?
Mm-hmm.
Some would argue that the capturing, the so-called metadata, the capturing of that body of information, which is, it's hard to measure, right? I don't know how many billion calls a day. That the capture of that data by the government in and of itself should be unlawful or shouldn't happen. Others would say, well, capturing that information is one thing. Going into a record, an individual and a phone number, and then leading into inside that record, what the conversation or what happened. That's really where you have this tension, that just the broad capture of all that information doesn't, legal issues don't arise until you actually open the record, so to speak. I'm using kind of broad, not very sophisticated terminology, but that's, so that's where some of the conflict is. But, I mean, the NSA people testified in public the other day about, the testimony was dozens of plots were foiled. There's, we know on the public record some plots that were foiled that we all now know about after the fact. Who knows? And I don't even know. Maybe somewhere down the road, NSA will scrub things and be able to give us more specificity, which frankly would help, because I think people would understand better what the end result is. But what do you do in an instance where you get a terrorist in another country calling a number in the United States? That contact alone might give you a lot of information, but it might just be a building block, because then that guy in the United States calls someone else, and that's where the bad activity starts. So how do you capture enough information to trace from point A to point B to point C, and point B and C are in the United States? So it's remarkable technology that we have, but these tensions are always going to be there. And if you're a member of Congress, part of getting it right, a big part of getting it right, is doing the oversight. And you kind of have this dichotomy in Congress, because you have folks on the intel committees and then everyone else who's not. I happen to be on foreign relations. I hear a lot about foreign relations. I can go to classified briefings on foreign relations. I can be exposed to intelligence briefings, but they don't occur every week or every month. So if you really, really, really want to stay up to the minute, you almost have to schedule your own briefing, which can be difficult. But yesterday was helpful because you had a lot of time and a lot of members there in the same room learning a lot. And a couple of Republicans were quoted today as saying they thought it was a very good briefing. And actually some of the people who were briefing us were in a couple months ago talking about other subjects, and a number of senators stormed out and said this briefing was a waste of time. So at least the briefing went well. Yeah. But I thought it was very helpful, without telling them what they told us. But we all have to work at this. We have to do oversight, and it's Congress's job to work on striking that balance.
Should there be a federal shield law?
Yeah. In a word, yes. Because in that instance, you might be referring to the Associated Press issue where the Justice Department was seeking information and surveillance of telephones connected to a press organization. The shield law, I think, is essential to keep that balance, which is similar to the balance we just talked about between security and a free press. The reason why a shield law is so helpful is because you have a judge as a kind of an independent arbiter. Similar to what you have in the NSA situation, you have this foreign intelligence court that makes decisions on a regular basis about the retrieval of information. And the same is true in the context of the press. You want to have no matter what administration, no matter what Justice Department, if you're a prosecutor, you're seeking information, and you think you really need it to achieve your goal, which is to stop a bad guy or to prosecute someone or to at least gather evidence, your objectivity is going to be clouded to a certain extent. It's human nature. That's why, the Shield Law allows a judge to be the kind of neutral party. I think we need that.
You joined the Finance Committee in
Yes.
February. What have you learned so far, and how has
A lot
it
more
been?
about the tax through it. And then after these reviews are over, we're going to have to try to come together and see if we can get an agreement to do tax reform. Both parties want it, both parties think it's important, but we don't yet have kind of a roadmap or an agreement to get tax reform done. If we're able to get that done, that's a great benefit to Pennsylvania. Virtually every taxpayer in the state would benefit from
When you
that.
say tax reform, you mean simplifying the tax
Right.
code?
Among others, simplifying, trying to get the corporate rate down, trying to take the complexity out of the code, preserving credits and incentives that lead to job growth, maybe scaling back the ones that aren't as effective. Just all kinds of ways that the tax code could give businesses more certainty to help grow the economy. So that would be of benefit to everybody, but we're a long way from that. But I think it's important that I put the time in on that. Healthcare implementation has been a big part of it. A series of hearings where either the HHS secretary or others are right in front of us, being closely questioned on implementation or policy, and that's going to be critically important to a state like ours, which has a high percentage of older citizens. We have and has a good commitment to children's health insurance, but a lot of young children that need quality health care, and a lot of workers and businesses as well. I think that effort is very important. Trade is another area which comes under our jurisdiction. It's a huge issue for our state, both trade policy and then related issues like China currency. A whole series of questions or debates we'll have on trade that I think directly impact our manufacturing economy here in the state and ultimately affect the economy of the state. So I'm fortunate to be on there, and Senator Toomey and I joined at about the same time. He got there about a month ahead of me. And in that Thursday meeting, we're sitting right next to each other, listening to the presentation, asking questions, or making our points. And I hope it can lead to some kind of a consensus this year or next year. I'm hoping for 2013.
Jumping
Yep.
to state politics, I know that you're also going to attend the Pennsylvania State Democratic Committee is in town tonight,
Right.
and you're going over there. Going to talk to them. Some of the gubernatorial candidates for the Democrats will be there.
Right.
Is there anyone that stands out to you as a leader, as someone who you're going to back, or are you not going to take that stand quite yet?
They're all wonderful people.
Is there anyone that you've worked with that,
I think I've worked with, either have worked with directly or know each of the announced or potential candidates down the road. I don't know if that means there'll be 3 or 4 or 7, whatever, but usually by the time you're my age, you've been through as many elections as I've been, you've kind of met, if you haven't met everyone, you're probably missing something. But it'll be an interesting year next year, and it's always easier to give others advice about their campaigns than to run your own and to be in the battle. But I'm looking forward to watching other people campaign, and I can be able to concentrate on doing my job.
do you like where you are in the Senate, or would you ever consider ambitions
do.
for a governor run to
I really,
carry on that lineage of your father?
well, I tried once and it didn't work out. But
Would you ever consider again?
Maybe someday. But I really enjoy the work in the Senate. It's an enormous privilege to represent our state. We have 2 senators, but each of us represent the whole state. Some days it might be easier to cut it in half and divide it up, but you don't do that. I represent 12.5 million plus people, and so Senator Toomey. It's a great privilege, and I'm really blessed to have the chance to serve for 6 years, the opportunity to be reelected and serve for 12. And it is my own theory, and others might disagree, but I think the Senate is the kind of place where, because it's a legislative body, things take longer, harder to get consensus, that you really, if you're going to run, you should try to commit yourself to at least 12 years, 2 terms, because it can take a while to have the kind of impact that you hope to have. So I've been blessed to have been elected twice, and I'm pretty fortunate.
Okay, do you want to set any term limits for yourself?
No, but the voters will do that one way or the other.
How would you rate President Obama's performance?
First term or second term? Overall?
Overall.
Yeah. I'd rate it pretty highly. I think he's done good work. I think he has spent more time in the last couple of months engaging with Republican members of Congress than he had prior to this, or at least, I don't have a count of the hours or days, but it seems like he's spending more time in that. And I think that's good. I think he needs to continue that.
You were an early supporter.
I was, yeah.
And the discussion was that this would give you entry, advantage. How's that work out?
Well, maybe it does, but it's most of the work that, or most of the results you get for the state you're representing is through the legislative process. Sometimes what happens in the administration can be furthered by, or I should say, sometimes what you are able to do can be enhanced or furthered by a relationship with a particular administration or the work you do with an agency. But a lot of it's still in the legislative arena. But look, he's had to govern. He's had to be the president in a really tough economic time for the country. Tremendous. You look at those bar charts about as the economy was getting in a lot of trouble at the end of the last administration and still in trouble for many months in his administration. Fortunately, that negative job growth number kept getting smaller and smaller, and now we've had several million jobs created since roughly the spring of 2010. He's had to govern in a time when there's tremendous partisanship and a lot of divisions in the country, and I think he's worked hard to repair the economy and get it moving. I think we've had some success lately. In the last couple of months, we're getting the kind of job growth we had hoped for, but frankly not enough. Last month, the national number, just private sector jobs, is a little bit more than 175,000. I'd feel better if we were at 200 or 225 or higher. So we're moving in the right direction in good numbers, but not good enough. Stock market looks a lot better than it was. Housing is better. Consumer confidence is at not a record high, but it's as high as it's been in years. But a lot of that data on the business page doesn't match the reality that some small business owners have in their lives. A lot of families, when they're talking around a kitchen table, the stock market or the consumer confidence number doesn't often mean too much to them. So I think he's got to continue to focus, and we all need to, both parties, on the economy. That's where these job creation strategies that I talked about are so important, about incentives to hire or tax certainty for small businesses are critically important. But I think he's done good work. I don't always agree with him. I'm on a different page with him on trade and China currency, and I've been critical, as you know, on Syria as well. And there have been times when, whether it's on aspects of health care, or he doesn't support the repeal of the Medical Device Act like I do, or whether it's an agency not, in my judgment, not doing its job or being responsive to taxpayers that I represent. So we don't always agree, but I think he's done good work, and I think he's a good man.
What about Tom Corbett?
Well, we have great disagreements on policy, but he's a good man. He and I have tried on a number of occasions to work together, and we can. I think it's important that U.S. senators and members of our federal delegation work with the governor of either party. And I think that will continue, no matter what the result next year.
There's been this pattern for years of two terms, rotating back and forth between the parties. Is this a year, do you think, where that pattern changes, or the next election?
I don't know. I think political scientists could probably give a better answer in terms of either predicting it or analyzing.
When you travel around the state, do you have a sense that Tom Corbett is in trouble, or is this just the normal?
Well, it's hard. I don't know what the numbers show necessarily, but I just ran last year.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tough environment to be an incumbent. I mean, it was I had a race where we won comfortably and got more votes than any Senate candidate ever. We got above 3 million. That's never happened before in Pennsylvania. But if you had told me before the 2-3 weeks before the election that I'd get over 3 million votes, that I'd win by, not that I remember, but 512,000, I would have said, nice thought, but it probably won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But because whenever the economy is either in rough shape or recovering slowly, as it was through 2012, and I think a little better this year, but not where it needs to be. And whenever you have the kind of partisan divisions you have in a presidential year, if you're an incumbent running, you're going to be shot at politically. So I think that's true in state races and federal races as well. But I love, it's always interesting to be a pundit about someone else's race, but I'm trying to resist the temptation to analyze someone else's candidacy.
One issue we didn't touch on is immigration.
Mm-hmm.
Are the sides so far apart that nothing's going to happen on that this year, or do you think
No,
it's possible?
I think to the contrary. I think we can get immigration through the Senate, and I believe it's possible. And if you've noticed, when people ask me whether something's going to pass, I just say, oh, I don't make those predictions. On this one, I'm willing to predict that it will pass, and it will pass by a substantial enough margin that you're going to have not just a consensus in the Senate, which is very important, but you'll have a little bit of momentum that I think will help get it passed in the House. That doesn't mean we're not going to have a tough debate. We're going to have really tough votes, because you're going to have votes that under any other scenario, you will have people voting no, when under any other scenario they'd be a definite yes. No meaning if this passes, the deal will collapse and we won't pass the bill. So you'll see example after example of that, and it'll be very tough. In fact, I think it'll be tough for both parties, but I think some Republican senators that have worked hard on this and put a lot at risk are going to have even tougher votes. I think their party in the Senate will push them in ways that will be very difficult, and I admire what those 8 senators have done. I mean, people from a broad cross-section of the electorate, basically saying that we've got to fix a broken system. Everyone agrees on that it's broken. We've got to be able to use this moment to reform the system, or it's going to be very hard to do it for many, many years. Maybe some people think 25 years. The good news is that you have a consensus. A lot of the elements of the bill will help substantially to fix the system. The deficit reduction benefit of this, by at least 2 think tanks that I know of, one of them being Cato, and I'll double check that it's Cato, but I'm pretty sure, say that the deficit reduction on this could be as high as $2.7 trillion over the next decade. Let's say they're half wrong, which I don't think they are, but let's say they're half wrong. It's still a lot of deficit reduction.
Yeah.
I mean, tell me another policy that you pass a bill and you've just triggered 2.7 of deficit reduction, 2.7 trillion. But even if that were not true, even if it was neutral on deficit reduction, fixing a broken system, giving certainty to employers and folks in the agriculture field, and making it very clear that this path that you put people on, workers, and the longer run path on citizenship it's earned. You gotta jump through a lot of hoops to get, and the border security elements of this are very, very tough. And that's why I think you have the buy-in that you have, the consensus by both parties. But having said all that stuff that's positive, it could unravel very quickly if you have a couple of amendments that kind of break up that coalition. And it could come from the left, or it could come from the right. And it's going to be an interesting process for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
But I'm confident.
All right.
And I'm usually non-committal
Yeah.
on vote totals, because I'm not the whip. The whip is paid to count votes, and that's not part of my job.
I'm thinking a lot of our viewers aren't aware of the deficit reduction amount or the rationale for it that you just mentioned. Could you talk a little bit about where those savings come from?
Yeah, well, it's a lot of it, and I won't try to encapsulate those studies. I'd refer people. John Rizzo can get the site,
Yeah.
but it's a pretty big number.
Okay.
I'd rather not try to
Yeah, okay.
summarize a study that really smart people have worked on.
What, could you give an example, what could unravel the bill?
Some of the proposals that have surfaced even the last couple of days, maybe too much of a change on what they've agreed to on border security could do it, would threaten it. I'll have a better sense of that when we start voting more than we have. We've only had a couple of votes, but we'll have a long list of votes where, and frankly, I want to believe that everyone offering those amendments is offering them to improve the bill, to make it better. That will be true in some instances, but some of those amendments will be offered purely to blow up the bridge, and that's what I worry about. And you've got people that have invested a lot of time and a lot of political capital. I mean, just think of the borders. You have proposals made on the Republican side that John McCain and Jeff Flake, both from Arizona, where the border issue is front and center, unlike a lot of eastern states or midwestern states, where that is the number one issue. Not just in immigration, might be the number one issue in the whole state. In places like Arizona, I don't know what the polling shows, but I would bet it's way up there. That you'll have potentially a Republican amendment that will sound good and be very popular, that several members of that, all those members of that coalition will vote against. And they will take a political pounding for it. And there were some in committee that almost took the thing off the rails, and it got through committee. I think they dealt with 140 amendments or in that neighborhood in committee. Not all votes, but that many amendments. I don't know how many votes they had. Probably, they had scores of votes. Probably, 40 or 50 votes. So I think it's a good moment for the country to get this right. The ancillary benefit of this is pretty important. The substantive benefit, I think, is a very compelling case on shutting down the borders, the economic benefit, giving employers certainty, bringing people out of the shadows. And obviously a lot of that deficit reduction revenue comes from having more tax revenue, payroll tax, all that. But apart from all the substantive reasons that it's a good idea to pass immigration reform, just the message it sends to the country that Democrats and Republicans, in the midst of all of this rancor and partisanship, can come together on something as big and as consequential as immigration reform and get it passed. I think it would send a good message to the markets. It would send a good message to taxpayers, even if they say immigration doesn't affect my life, which it does, but even if they think it doesn't. They might say, but at least they came together and did something big done. We have a farm bill we just got done through the Senate. I think the House will get it done as well. And for a year like this, where we've just come off a really difficult presidential and congressional election year, getting big items like that done is important for everybody, so. And you've got to try, I mean, you got to try to bring about more bipartisanship. And as a member of Congress, you can't just lament the divisions or lament the partisan acrimony. You got to do something about it. And I'm probably not doing enough, but I try hard. And part of that is, you know, trying to have a good working relationship with the senator you serve with, or the House members you serve with. And Pat Toomey and I have worked hard to work together. We just got 2 judges done yesterday. Nitza Quinones, a Latina judge from Philadelphia, and Judge Schmale from Berks County. You know, we both had to agree on both of them. You can't, the way our system is set up, you can't agree on just one. You have to agree on both. And we got both of them confirmed, and that's good news. So.
Do you have any sort of relationship with Joe Pitts?
Yeah, I know Congressman Pitts. Not well. I'm trying to remember the overlap years. When I was elected Auditor General, I think he was already in the U.S. Congress, so I kind of missed him. He was in the General Assembly when my father was there, and they knew each other better than I did at the time. But I've gotten to know him a little bit in the years that I've been in Washington. We've had some delegation meetings. Sometimes that Senator Toomey and I call together, or one calls, or the other calls people together. But so I've gotten to know Joe a little bit. But the House and Senate dynamic doesn't, that interaction doesn't happen enough. Even though there's only about 50 yards between the 2 buildings, or 2 chambers, they kind of become separate worlds, and we should figure out more ways to bring them under the same umbrella more often.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the time. I'm trying to think of something I didn't cover, but you covered a lot. Good to see you.
Good to see you,
Thanks so
sir.
much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Good to see you. So did you get there much by that storm yesterday? Not at all. Not at all, really?
I was in this one here.
We were getting all these warnings.
Well,
I was in a meeting. I could
really
really
listening to the audio, but
My fat, I don't know why. I was-
you were fine.
End of the world storm, but it was gone in about, I think, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Almost to the point where the sidewalks are almost dry. So a lot of heavy wind, a real downpour, but then it stopped. So I wonder about other subjects. Like so many places have been hit in the last year or so by terrible weather.